All right, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you here to our CAQDAS Networking Project's webinar series. We have been running these webinars for a few years now and are very much looking forward to this one. I'm joined today by my colleague, Christina Silva, and my name is Sarah Bullock, and we've been working at the CAQDAS Networking Project together for a long time. A few things to say before we get going with our webinar today. We have launched two new initiatives recently. One is a series of resources around the use of AI in qualitative data analysis. And we have a series of different pages that support us as researchers to think about the use of AI and appropriate use of AI in relation to qualitative data analysis. So if that's something that you're thinking about, then do check those pages out. We also have the CAQDAS Networking Project's blog, and we are posting on there and also inviting guest blogs to post there as well. So if you're interested in writing a blog for us, having looked at the ones that we've got there, then do get in touch. We're always looking for new blogs to be posting there. A few other things to say as well. We at the CAQDAS Networking Project have for many, many years run a series of courses. Many of these are online these days, some in person, but many of them are online. And we have a few coming up there, an advanced support workshop on the 13th of June on In Vivo, integrating AI assist features in CAQDA into our qualitative analysis workflow. The 2nd and the 3rd of July are online introductions to In Vivo, and then on the 10th of July, AI-assisted literature reviewing using Atlas TI. And there are places still available on all of those courses, and they're all delivered online. So do have a look at those if you would like. We also have another webinar coming up next week on the 18th of June, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the session today. So without any further ado, let's get to know our speakers today. So today we've got Kien Nguyen Trong from Monash University in Australia and Ngoc Lan Ngung from the National Economics University in Vietnam, talking about narrative-integrated thematic analysis, the idea of generating qual themes without coding. I am very much looking forward to this. A little bit more about Kien and Ngoc before we get going. Kien is GEDSI, GEDSI, Gender Equality and Disability and Social Inclusion Lead at Monash University, and a researcher at the Water Sensitive Cities Australia Centre there. With over 17 years as an experience as a sociologist, he's also editor at the Qualitative Report and serves on editorial boards at Sociological Research Online, International Journal of Qualitative Research Methods as well. As founder of the Vietnam Social Research Methodology and Qualitative Methods Center, Kien advances methodological innovation and capacity building in Southeast Asia, and his interests spans qualitative methods, generative AI, climate change adaptation, and disaster vulnerability. Ngoc is a lecturer at the National Economics University in Vietnam with a PhD in business administration, and her research focuses on strategic management, entrepreneurship, innovation, and applications of generative AI in research. She is published in international journals such as Current Psychology, Journal of Entrepreneurship in Emerging Economies, and Corporate Governance. So it's a real pleasure to have Ngoc and Kien here with us today. They'll be speaking for just over half an hour. Please, during their talk, do post any comments or questions that you have in the chat, and we will be collating those, and we'll be putting those to Ngoc and Kien at the end. Christina will be facilitating a discussion at that point. So do go ahead and post your thoughts in there. The webinar is also being recorded, and you'll all be sent a link to that recording once we've processed it. So without any further ado, very much looking forward to it. Welcome, Ngoc, and welcome, Kien, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Christina and Sarah, for having us. So today the topic is narrative-integrated thematic analysis. a approach to generate qualitative themes without coding. So today we will cover three parts. The first part focus on the rise of generative AI in qualitative data analysis. And the second part focus on introducing our approach, NITA. And the third part is a focus on a step-by-step guide with a work example, focus on the paper that we have recently done. Let's begin. So first of all, the rise of generative AI. So I think that it's quite early in 2023. Christina Silver already suggested that the application of qualitative data analysis with generative AIs will go in three scenarios. And the first scenario is focused on integrating AI into the current qualitative data analysis software. So, for example, by the time that of this presentation, we see that the top three of the software in qualitative data analysis, NVivo, MaxQDA, and Atlas.t, already incorporate AI into its current structures. And second scenario is develop a new qualitative data analysis, or QA for short. And we can see that there are a lot of new softwares like CodeLoop, QA, and recently QInsights. You can see that the paper by Susan Fries about the conversation no analysis with AI. We will talk about this later. The third scenario is using AI with a general purpose chatbot like ChatGPT by OpenAI, Cloud by Anthropic, DeepSeek, Google Gemini, and so on. So what are the potential of these generative AI chatbots? So current application can be classified into basically two trends or themes. The first theme is try to innovate the coding approaches. So coding approach is like focus on thematic analysis, and within thematic analysis, we see that reflexive thematic analysis proposed by Brown Clark is one of the approaches that receive the most attention. And then we have the template analysis by King, and also other kind of approaches like content analysis and graph theory. However, recently we see that there's a new trend that try to shifting the current approach to non-coding perspectives, where we signify new paradigms. So David Morgan said in the paper by 2023 that if manual coding of data segments has been the dominant paradigm for qualitative analysis, then yes, I believe that querying with ChatGPT does threaten that dominance. Susan Fries also say that the application of generative AI will signify a significant shift in beliefs about how researchers can effectively comprehend and interpret reality. So current approach is like query-based approach proposed by David Morgan, or conversational analysis with AI by Susan Fries, using the QInsights, or Adam Hayes proposed that we can see that generative AI as a conversational partner. So these approach based on conversational methods and try to querying through the data with the support of generative AI. So our NITA approach also follow the truths. So what about NITA? So before we begin, we would like to clarify a little bit. What is the theme? What is the concept of theme? So first of all, theme is most people, a lot of people consider theme as topic summaries or topic domains, which is defined by Brown Clark as summaries of the range of meanings in the data related to a particular topic or domain of discussion. So it means that the domain of knowledge that identify in your research questions. However, in this approach, we apply the second meaning of the themes, which is considered theme as a shared meaning pattern. So this is the concept defined by Brown Clark as a theme that is pattern of shared meaning organized around central concept across the data set. With this understanding, so we can see that themes is a result of analysis process rather than an input of the process. Secondly, that is the result of the interaction between the researchers and the participants and the data set. And also that is the results of the researchers' active interpretations together with AI suggestion if we are going to incorporate AI. So what is the implication of this understanding? There are 2 points. One is questions, research questions contain domains of knowledge, but these buckets are empty of themes, and we need to fill them with the meanings constructed across the data. Second point is no matter how good AI generative themes are, if researchers or we do not use this theme to arrive at our own interpretation or theme or meaning construction, what AI suggested are meaningless. So with that understanding and approach, we propose NITA through 6 stages. So NITA is an approach that start with design a perfect procedure. And I remember that in the book that by Silver and colleagues, they said that first of all, when we need to understand the conflict nature between software and qualitative research. So it means that we need to start with design the strategies from start, and perfect procedure help you design that. The second stage is where you try to familiarize with the data and prepare the data set, but also think about how to select a suitable AI tools for you. Not every AI tool is suitable. Some will myelize the tools that incorporated in current qualitative software like NVivo, but some myelize chatbot. And also prepare the system with different frameworks like roles and guides, and develop the custom GPT or custom project that help us guide through the analysis. The third stage is try to focus on generate in-use themes or candidate themes that then they stay open to the change throughout the analysis process, and then we run prompts through different on different occasions to test and understand the meanings. The fourth stage is focus on construct individual narratives, where we try to come back from the abstraction, where we building themes to try to build the individual narratives. And this is focused on building the contiguity, the concept that Maxwell and Kimir propose that it try to focus on the real world relationships among participants in their context. The fifth stage, try to develop the cascade patterns, where we try to understand themes across individuals. And the final stage is try to focus on writing up. So how does this approach compare to other approaches? So you can see that in the current approach, with the thematic analysis dominated by coding approach, we can see that we normally, that is an abstraction process where you start with getting familiar with the data, and then you do the coding and categorizing to form categories, and we generate theme and interpreting and writing up. So current approach like reflexive thematic analysis, where coding is essential steps after getting familiar with your data, and after that branch classes go on to develop themes. And two-cycle approach is proposed by Saranya in his famous books Coding Manual, and in that he proposed two stages or 2 cycles of coding, where the first one focused on specific, the second one focused on patterns, rules, and so on. Framework analysis developing by Spencer and Riches in 1990s, and then recently Gales and colleagues turned that into a quite applicable process where placing coding is essential steps in developing analytical framework or thematic framework before generate themes and analyze matrix. And then we have template analysis proposed by King, where he positioned preliminary coding as an essential part that leads to clustering or develop category before developing templates and interpretation. So my approach in a previous paper on coding approach, developing some kind of guided approach or guided AI thematic analysis, where that adapt template analysis into 4 stages, where leading focus on coding, but also developing templates and generate themes. So the current non-coding approach is quite different because they, for example, omit the coding stage like Morgan. So Morgan, you can see that basically his approach is query-based approach, focused on 3 steps. And the familiarization with the data is implied but not specified, but that implies that it's important. So the first step is asking broad questions to get the understanding of candidate teams, and then follow up with the specific queries to further produce interpretation, and then examine with the supporting data. Susan Freeze terms her approach as conversational analysis with AI. Start with get to know the data or familiar with the data, and then prepare for analysis. So this is kind of different from other approach where the preparation for the systems is important. And then she go on to do the asking the questions, which quite similar to Morgan. Also synthesize the insights and propose possible 5th steps where developing theoretical reasoning. So our approach is quite similar to those, where we have the planning the perfect, where we start with doing planning and develop the strategy before engaging with any AI, and then doing the preparation for systems, data, and familiarization with data. And we also omit the coding here. So focus on generate themes directly, but after that, you can see that the process is focused on further develop the interpretation through constructing individual narratives and meta narratives. So how can we do that in specific project? So here is the work example. So first of all, before we start with the research project, we should think about strategies to engage with software or engage with data analysis. Paulus and Lester recently said in their paper that why at times methods should and do drive the use of technologies, at other times available digital tools and spaces may actually change the methods we use. What does this mean? That means that we need to adapt our digital research workflow to incorporate GenAI because it's a new technology and it have the capacity to shift the way we conduct analysis before. So in this research, we propose perfect as a reflexive procedure that perfectly guides our research design, developing the research, our data analysis strategies, monitoring, evaluating, and learning from working with GenAI for the purpose of qualitative data analysis. It's the perfect is stand for purpose, where you specify your research objectives. So from your broad research goals, you need to narrow down it to the specific objectives that you can use generative AI. So it means that not every objectives, not every research questions you can use with GenAI. And after that, you envision specific steps to reach the objectives. This is try to narrow down into specific activities and steps. First is realize, try to think of AI expected outputs. So we should think about what is the output we want from AI. And then formulate is try to think of how do we formulate or design prompts that effectively obtain the output that we want. Experiment is where we try to continuously experiment with the chosen GenAI to get the output that we want. Check and reflect is the process where we critically check and reflect on the output generated by AI. And tune is where we try to adapt and edit it. So this is the iterative and reflexive development and adaptation. So it means that after stage 1, where you initially develop the first draft of perfect, you use it and adapt it throughout the research process. So this is one of the application case that you build in your Google spreadsheet, where you can see that purpose and vision and realize. You narrow down from your research questions to objectives to expected outputs, and that is your research space, right? And formulate and experiments is where you enter human AI space, where you interacting with AIs on iterative occasions. Check, reflect, and tune is come back to your researcher space, to reflect and think about what AI produce and suggest. So you can see that this is try to connect the research strategies and software tactics. And I call this is the human AI sandwich model, where we're keeping human in the loop for designing, developing, monitoring, evaluating, and learning with AI. So it means that your perfect, if you use, it will be different from ours. Perfect in this project will be different from other project. Perfect should be and always be tailored to meet your research needs. So before any research project, you should engage with ethics consideration when using AI. Probably I don't have much time to talk about this topic today, but we should consider the following topics, like in LibPVD framework: legal consideration, ethical guidelines, application, permission, privacy, ratification of the output, and disclosure. I will come back to this if we need more clarification. So prompting techniques has been hype, and a lot of people talking about we need to collect a lot of prompts, a good prompt, so that we can generate good output. However, recently I think that with the advancement of generative AI, AI is less sensitive to the prompting techniques. It means that you not easy to select one and only good prompting techniques that you can use for ever, but you need to adapt and revise constantly. So in our paper, we propose actor framework to design and combine different prompt techniques. For example, actor consists of actor, where you specify the role of generative AI. For example, you are a qualitative research assistant, or you are template analysis researchers. Context, where you give essential background information, but also you provide the domain knowledge. For example, you define what is a code is. Task is where you define the specific actions that generative AI need to perform. For example, can you please summarize this transcript? Can you do that, right? Output is where you try to describe what is the specific output you need, whether it is a summary of 400 words or a summary in 3 bullet points. And reference, it try to identify the specific data or resources that you want AI to focus on and processing. So that is the 5 components, but normally now you can put the actor into project instruction, and the most things you can use either context, task, outputs, and reference. Now, step 2, when you start to working and with selected AI tool, you need to prepare data and generative AI systems. First of all, we introduce about data sets. So in this paper, we focus on the public available data set called Environmental Change in Taoist, provided by Lumivero. Is published on their website. This is based on the original research conducted in 2008, 2009. And this dataset consists of 11 transcripts or short interviews. The total word count is about 20,000 words. Each interview transcript about 6 pages long and about 2,000 words. The transcripts are provided with structure by topics like this. So when we try to prepare the data set, it means that we anonymize or pseudonymize the data set. If you use the original data, you need to remove the personal information, but it's not applicable in our research because it's a publicly available data set. So we prepare the irrelevant transcript in PDF format, and then we upload that into the AI systems. Please note that we remove the heading so that it not avoid the domain-led theme development by AI. So in generative AI, for example, ChatGPT, you're able to turn off data for training, that's important. And then you set up the systems involves the use row and guides. So the rows and guides is trying to identify and address the question like who you are and what your requirements, what traits ChatGPT should have is meant to the guideline that we want ChatGPT or generative AI to behave. For example, you require it to behave to certain ethics guidelines. So if you want to know more about this, read the paper I cite here. So in the preparation for generative AI, we also can create a custom GPT. So in ChatGPT, you can use that use the custom GPT function to create a GPT that's tailored to your research needs. So for example, in here, we create Narrative-Integrated Thematics on NITA, and we provide the guidelines. In here, you can assign the roles for it, and then you can be able to upload the transcripts to train the NITA. The second function is that you use the projects. So both Claude and ChatGPT now you can use specific projects with the trained data set. So for example, you use the project NITA, and in here you can apply the instructions and upload the transcripts and the guidelines. So move on to the stage 3 where you generate candidate themes. So the themes is come up with these prompts. You can see that we have the reference to the data set, for example, based on the uploaded interviews, or we have the task for AI. We have the definition of themes where we use Brown-Clark's definition, and then we have the requirement for the output. So the prompt is focused on can you generate themes in response to the research questions. And this is the first result. You can see that the results suggests 8 themes. And the themes here, when we read this, it appears like the topic-based nouns or topic summaries because it uses mostly nouns and it doesn't suggest a lot of things based on these names. But the meanings or description, the theme meanings is well articulated. The second observation is that you can see that the quotation from the output is quite short and not so meaningful. So we need to extend them. So we use another prompt to extend the code to understand better what is the context of that quotation. So this helps us get more familiar with the data, and then we can read the transcript in depth. For example, you can see that the red sentence is the original quotation, which is very short. So for example, in the case of James, you can see that the quote original quote is 13 generation that we know that they was in North Carolina. So that's actually not refer to James' family origins, but rather refer to Mary, who is James' wife. So it means that we need to check with the transcript and ask it to extend the code so that we can understand better. And also there's some occasion where ChatGPT made up the prompts. So the better we should ask it to extend the code, the more we can check the content. So next step is we try to compare the list of themes generated on 3 occasions. So you can see that the themes here we generate is mostly comparable. On 3 occasions, when we generate it and we color them together, you can see that most of the themes are parallels, and it show quite the patterns across these occasions. So based on this, we compare with our previous course, which is based on coding approach. So in this, we can see that the tables here is from our previous research, and that's generated 5 themes, and our current research they got 6 themes, which is one theme's resisting chain and development is new one, and the rest is quite similar, and we color them in similar colors. So this implies that we can generate themes without coding and can also obtain the level of the themes similar to coding approach. So now I will hand over to my colleagues to present the rest.
Right, thank you, Dr. Kian, for your introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Lan Ngọc from National Economics University in Vietnam. So I will continue explain step 4, 5, and 6 of our NITA framework. In step number 4, we aim to construct individual narrative. And to do that, we have 2 specific tasks. The first one, we want to construct an individual narrative for each transcript. And the second one, we want to identify any theme that are missing. And here are the 2 prompts we use for these 2 tasks. So as you can see, the prompt use the technique that Dr. Kian mentioned before, the actor framework that have very clear objectives, the goal, the task, the context, and the expected outcome in terms of both content and format. So for the first task, here is the ChatGPT response. So we, as a researcher, we need to back to the transcript, read back and forth to double check it. And we can see that while ChatGPT observations are quite correct, but there is some small issues that we need to edit it. For example, for the first case of transcript number 1 about Barbara, the first interviewee, in theme number 3, community and connectedness, ChatGPT report that very limited evidence for the active community engagement of Barbara. However, when we check transcript 1, we see that Barbara did mention her childhood when she experienced a sense of strong community that she enjoyed growing up. So the important thing when we come up to this stage is that we all the way need to read and reread the transcript carefully to make sense of the story. And the second task, we asked ChatGPT to identify the themes that are not captured in our initial thematic framework. And the expected outcome, we want ChatGPT to provide quotation and detail to that story. We see that ChatGPT could provide new themes for each transcript, at least 4 new themes for each transcript. And here is a part of ChatGPT response. And when we compare ChatGPT response with the transcript, we see that ChatGPT can provide the new theme that somehow it provides nuances. However, when we compare, we see it actually is relating to our theme in our thematic framework. We move to state number 5. In this state, we want to construct the meta-narrative, and we have 3 sub-steps in state number 5. We want to compare across case, in this case is gender, and then construct the story by gender. Second, we want to have more meaningful theme names. And the final part of state 5, we want to create a meta-narrative. For part 1 of step 5, we asked ChatGPT to analyze the differences and similarities across gender in all 11 interview transcripts. And here's a piece of ChatGPT response. And we see ChatGPT could provide sub-theme for both similarities and differences. And once again, as a researcher, we need to read the transcript again quite carefully to check, to double check the ChatGPT response. And after that, based on the comparison across gender, we construct the story for men narratives and women narrative. The second state, state number 5, we ask ChatGPT to scan the database again to come up with the theme's name that's based on meaningful quotation from the participants. And ChatGPT can provide several options to choose. And we need to compare and to select one option, one best option. For example, as you can see on the screen, list number 1 is the theme names in our original framework. And list number 2 is one suggestion, one alternative for more meaningful names. And we, as a researcher, we compare together. And we see that the theme name in list number 1 are more formal, and it's made clear to our core concepts of connection to Daoist, while list number 2 is more informal because it uses the languages of the participants. And list number 2 provide more nuances to the theme meanings, while list number 1 offer more abstraction. And we, the two researchers, need to discuss together to decide which one should we choose for more meaningful theme names. And finally, we choose list number 2 because it integrates both in vivo phrase and our abstraction. And the last part of state number 5, we want to create a meta-narrative that is an overarching story that integrates all individual experience, action patterns, and social cultural connection. We want to create a thematic map, and we ask ChatGPT to develop a flowchart. And the expected outcome is the syntax that can be exported to Mermaid Chart. Mermaid Chart is a free online chart generation tool, creation tool. And here the response of ChatGPT, we copy this syntax and paste into Mermaid. And here is the outcome. On Mermaid, we can edit, we can change any details that we want. And this is the final thematic map we discussed together. And as you can see, here is our meta-narrative. Address the research question of how people connect to Daoist, and people nurture their connection to Daoist through 3 mechanisms. First, through family ties. Second, community woven together. And 3, where nature speaks of belonging. All 3 mechanisms lead to the prize. They be proud of the people, the language, and the traditions in Daoist. Besides, the natural beauty is enhanced by their livelihood shaped by the sea. And all these themes converge together and form the final one, the ultimate themes that is the resistance to change, which is not sustainable, or we call the theme as we don't like unsustainable change. The final stage of our NITA framework, that is writing up. In this stage, all are done by the researcher, the author. We base on what we have done so far in stage 3, 4, and 5 to writing up the theme description, making sense of the themes, and create cascade analysis. In this state, we want to turn our theme analysis into a kind of specific output. In our case, normally that is academic output, for example, the research articles. So that is the 6th stage of our NITA framework applied for this project. Here are our key references. So thank you very much for your attention, and we would like to welcome all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, indeed, both of you, for that wonderful presentation. Having read your paper, it was really great for me to hear you talk about the process, which really brought it to life for me. So thank you very much for that. We've got some questions in the chat, and myself and Sarah have also got lots of questions. I'll start off with a few from the chat, and we'll see where we go. So there was one question relating to the sort of generative aspect of large language models as generative AI. Large language models generate different results each time. How does that affect research, and specifically the qualitative analysis process in NITA?
Yeah. Can I go, Ngọc? If you have more, you can add. I think that is really interesting questions. So I think that is to answer this question, we should come back to the definition of like ontology is too philosophical, but I think that is important because, for example, small Q qualitative researchers based on positivism consider that also, okay, there's only a truth out there independent of our mind. So it means that you go there, you go into the data and you try to search for the themes, same theme already there. And if we follow that philosophy, we can see that if generative AI generate inconsistent results, so it means that we cannot really trust the process because it doesn't seem to be able to identify the truth, the only truth out there. However, if we consider that the inconsistent result is the nature of generative AI, and we only use them as suggestions rather than the final answer, and we use that suggestion to further our analysis and only go on to do more in-depth interpretation, so that's fine. So I think so.
Did you want to add anything, Ngọc, to that?
Yeah, I agree with him.
Okay. It raises or it speaks to another question, I think, also in terms of what the purpose of using generative AI is in our qualitative analysis process. And there was another question which I think builds on what you've just said, which is if we always need to recheck what it creates. So you were talking about the checking process, doesn't that defeat the purpose? And I think that speaks back to what you said earlier. So I wonder if you could just layer up on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that even without generative AI and we use the softwares, I remember you said that the nature of qualitative research is also often conflict with the natures of or features of software, right, Christina, in your book. And I think that is the same with the generative AI and even more. And I think that is not the purpose of qualitative research is important, but the process where you spend time back and forth with the data. And even without generative AI, you still need to check back and forth between what you interpret and what data have. So come back and read your transcripts, and then you have the new interpretation, and then you come back again and you come back again until you feel that, all right, that is my interpretation now. So probably I stop there. Ngọc, do you want to add anything?
So that relates to the methods piece also, doesn't it? So I was, your figure comparing the existing thematic analysis approaches with non-coding approaches really forefronts the importance of methods in harnessing any tools for qualitative analysis, and the Perfect framework does that too. So in my observations, this is something that's often lacking when I see on social media researchers maybe who don't have so much of an academic grounding, maybe who are using some of the new tools that we have at our disposal now, are talking about doing qualitative analysis outside or in a methodological vacuum. And so that's something that I'm a little bit concerned about. And I wonder whether you can speak a little bit to that in terms of how we as a research community can address that issue. Do you have any thoughts?
I think that is the insightful questions. First of all, I think that we need to consider about the nature of thematic analysis. So thematic analysis is reflexive and iterative process. So for example, if you use generative AI and you generate a list of themes, so they are often not themes, although that they read like theme, but you can see that in our first occasions, it appear topic-based nouns or topic summary themes, which means, for example, if you have the research question like, what are the factors affecting the traffic behaviors? That is the research questions. As you can see that the domain of knowledge already appear in that research questions. For example, factors, for example, traffic behaviors, and you can easily use the current or existing theories to identify, for example, in factors you might have drivers, might have barriers, you might have psychology factors, social factors, but they only stay at the domain level. They're not theme yet. To have theme, you need to have your interpretations. So it means that AI can very good at generating a generic theme. It means the topic-based themes, but from there you need to take further interpretation to identify the pattern of same meanings across the data. So I think that is still your job. I think so.
Yeah, and that's the potential danger, isn't it, of what's happening with the use of tools without having that methodological scaffolding, I think. And so I very much see, you know, what we're doing at the CAQDAS networking project and what we do as teachers. I think we have a responsibility to really communicate how important that is in this context. I think there's a few other comments and questions that speak to this. So somebody said, great talk, thank you very much. Many interesting questions and possibilities. And this is coming from a student, a teacher as well. My students have been manually checking results from ChatGPT and calculating the sensitivity and specificity of even very basic descriptive coding and finding some terrible results from ChatGPT. So the question is, do you genuinely believe that this technology is currently at a place where it can meaningfully support qualitative work? And I think that question reflects some other comments happening in the chat about nuance. Can it really capture and identify that nuance in a way that we as human interpreters do? Can you reflect a little bit more on that?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, for example, if you think about coding, right? And for example, King's in his template analysis identified two type codings: descriptive and interpretative. And even in his text, he said that descriptive is more easy to identify, but interpretative code is really hard to define because it requires a lot on researchers' theoretical close. And in Brown Clark also they have two type codings like semantic code, which is focus on the surface of the language, and you have the latent coding where focus on the underneath themes. And to arrive at the latent meaning, you need to have the roots in theories to be able to arrive at the interpretation that that can make sense of the data. For example, if you only read the data, you can see that community is important. But community is important or strong bonds important, but how do you explain that? If you use a social capital theory, you can see that, okay, the community bonds can be defined basically two types of the social capital. For example, you have the bonding social capital, which is between the close ties people, your family, your friends, or close friends, and bridging social capital, which is between you and the remote friends who can bring you a lot of information but not so close. So if you use that themes frameworks, you can use further to compare between two types of social capitals. And I don't think that generative AI can do that, right? So it means that we need to use our theoretical roots to explain and arrive at our interpretations. And secondly, if your student use the ChatGPT and calculate the inconsistent results, I think that concern and alarming, because I think that's not the right way to use ChatGPT in qualitative data analysis. because you don't need to you cannot use it to discover the only truth in the data. That is impossible. You need to use that for your suggestion, for its suggestion, and you take that suggestion to arrive at deeper level of interpretation rather than users stay up there. So with that understanding and approach, you don't need to worry about the capacity of the technology so much. For example, if you have the on the toy table O3, O4, and GPT-4o, then I always prefer to use the most common model like 4os, because I don't need to have the most advanced models, because I always think that the most common model can perform the basic task, and from there I can take further interpretation. Hope that's answer the question.
Yeah, so you're talking about there being a dialogue and interaction between the AI and the human, and that also speaks for me to go back to that kind of why would we do it question, and there's a few questions around that in the chat as well. But you know, it's also seems to me that it's to do with what role we're giving the AI in this process. So are we seeing it to replace us in some way, or parts of what we might do in a process, or to assist us? And the way that you've just described that sort of dialogue, that iteration, that checking, that kind of like understanding what it can't do and what it can do is all part of that dialect. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think that in our my previous paper on can ChatGPT or generative AI be our research assistants to speak to sociology discussions in 1984. I think that the key thing is that generative AI is quite different from any other technologies come before it. Before you dump the text and you expect it to do the analysis for you. And before Aslat, I don't think that the technology before, even the knowledge systems, one of the technologies of AI before, they cannot do that for you. You still need to do a lot of works manually, right?
Yeah.
However, generative AI now can do it, and it's very risky if people understand it wrongly, right? So if you give it 20,000 words data set and ask it generate a list of themes for me, and it can generate, and it's look quite confidently good, right? And it's very risky because for qualitative researcher who understand deeply about the thematic analysis, it's not really the result that we want. It only is the surface suggestion, and we need to do a lot more than that. So I think it's still quite good at doing a research assistant role, where, for example, if you give it 20,000 words and ask it to outline the create the flow chart or the mermaid chart that outline the key themes, and then from there you explore further, and I think that is do quite good job. But I think that cannot replace our research roles. Ngọc, do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
You're mute.
You're muted.
Yeah, I totally agree with your answer.
That's great. So that leads us to think about why. Okay, so if we're talking a little bit about what some of the limitations might be and the work that we have to do in order to guide the AI to generate something that's useful for us and then check it and think about nuance. So there were a couple of questions in the chat which speak to why would you do this in the first place? And there was one question which was to do with why and how you became interested in this in the first place. And then following up from that related to, well, why as a qualitative researcher would I consider using these new tools, given all of the sort of caveats and the things that we've been talking about in this discussion?
Yeah, probably I think now also have the reasons, but for me, I think the first of all is the reason about being a researcher, also the mentors in qualitative research, because I think that it seems that generative AI is not outside the momentum anymore, and it's kind of part of everyday life, and everyone uses it. And I am afraid that if they use it wrongly, it can affect the quality of qualitative research. And I think one of the motivations in the first place try to use the methodology to help us guide or create a responsible and ethical use of generative AI. So I think that is the first reason. The second reason is that to try and test new technology to see how it change the way we doing the works. So that is because of the passion of innovative methodologies. And the third part is I think that because of the potentials that generative AI offers. So before you can think that qualitative data analysis is quite tiring and it's exhausting because you're dealing with a lot of data, right? And it's quite lonely. And I think that one of the emotional part of that using generative AI is that it you the sense of someone there chatting with you, and you're not lonely in that exploration of the themes and understand the themes. So I think that with the capacity of ChatGPT or quality, generative AI, in that it can necessitate conversations with qualitative researchers is one of the key features that make it different from other technologies, and also why we use it. I think Ngọc also have some reasons.
Yeah, Ngọc, let's hear yours.
Yeah, I just think back to the day ChatGPT appeared, and even in Vietnam, it's a little bit late compared to other countries. It's really hard to register an account. So in my university, my college start discussing about using AI, especially for research. So they talk about using AI for research. It's really magical. So in one click, you may write a research article. But I think that just only me. I think only me in that discussion. I keep quiet, and I think, oh my God, it's quite unethical when you use that for research. All research should be done by the researcher ourselves, right? So I think it's quite unethical, but everybody around that table say that, have you tried that? Have you tried that to do the literature review, for example? It's so a lot. But I also think that even literature review is very unethical to do AI. But I think it cannot be that comparing to calculator, for example. If you do calculator, at that time we may think it's unethical for mathematics calculation, for example. So I start researching and learning how to use it. And at that time, I found Dr. Kian. He started sharing the ideas about AI using, especially in qualitative. And I also very a few researchers in Vietnam that quite interested in qualitative research, even it's quite challenging. So that is my interest start from that thought and that day. That's my region. And I also conduct a very small research. I read the comments of YouTube viewer on the video that instructing how to use AI to in research article to write a research article. So I code that by myself to understand what the academic perceive about the using AI in very initial day. So they talk a lot about advantages, and also up to these days, a lot of people still doubt about that. Even generative AI and or other tool are using a kind of technology might improve. They still doubt about the quality, and a lot of risk come to it. So that's my interest.
So it's
and
really Yeah, thank you for that. It's really interesting to hear the kind of personal journeys that qualitative researchers have in terms of engaging with these tools. And you've both just mentioned ethics, which is something that we haven't really spoken about in depth today, but something that I think a lot of qualitative researchers bring to the table when they think about using these tools in terms of the development and consequences of using large language models on the environment, for example, and what the data is trained on and all of those sorts of things. But also as qualitative researchers, what happens to the data that we may be collecting from human participants and all of our responsibilities to that. So unfortunately, we haven't had time to talk about those issues today, but I will just pop into the chat a link for everyone where they can look at some of those things afterwards. But I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time together today. But thank you very much. It was really great to have a nice amount of time at the end to discuss your experiences and some of the issues that arise from your paper and your presentation. There were a lot more comments and questions in the chat than we could get to, but hopefully everybody, like myself, found it really inspiring and interesting presentation. So thank you very much for the time you've taken to be with us today. Those of you who are attending today may be interested in our next webinar, which takes the discussion about the use of AI for qualitative research further, where we will be hearing some use case examples about from a different context, thinking about how the UN have been using AI for qualitative research. So do join us for that on the 18th of June. That's only next week, I believe. So thank you all very much for taking the time for being here, and especially to our wonderful speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Christina and Sarah.